What's up, guys? This is going to be the daily look ahead for June 23rd for Thursday. So I'm going to start out with the weekly. Actually, I'll start out with EU. Start out with the weekly just so we have an idea of what it is that we're looking at from the higher time frame. Just better understand what it is that we're supposed to be looking for and keep aligned with what the higher time frame is ultimately trying to do. So right now, it looks like obviously we've sort of created demand over here. We've had that order flow shift, came back down, tapped into this high, pushed down, liquidated the low that puts us into the high, and now we could potentially be inducing this low to maybe have some sort of a pullback phase and then possibly drop off. It's really tough to say right now. We're kind of at a do or die spot for EU. Yeah, so as it stands, I'm essentially looking at this as, we have seen an order flow shift. We've seen it come back into our demand zone. In all fairness, we could potentially see some higher pricing from here. I know we've been on the side of the market looking for sells, but at some point we have to start reevaluating and start to look at what could potentially be happening in the market. So just to give you a little bit more of a zoomed in version, here is the daily. So daily swing points, I would say that the most recent swing structure is right here and right here. That's your most recent leg, previous leg. You see these are kind of getting tricky in here, but yeah, probably this to here, to here, to here, to here, here to here, and here to here. So right now we've obviously put in the new low, and now we're looking to put in the new lower high somewhere at some point, as long as we stay aligned with expectational order flow. So just keep in mind that ultimately our level that we're sort of looking at is in here, just to give you a better understanding of what it is that we're looking at. So you can see that we have tapped into the 50%. We've had a level to induce. We've tapped into lower time frame flip zone in and around this region. And again, I'm just breaking everything down to kind of give us a little bit of context going into the next couple of weeks and give us an idea of what it is that we should be looking for. So get the flip zone, boom, tap in, liquidate, come back up, come back across, and then come directly into the demand zone, right? So now that we're in this sort of demand region on the daily, we can jump down onto our lower time frames and start to decipher what's happening within the intraday sort of time frames. So let's go over to daily demand. Oops. Why is that not working? Oh, that's dark mode. That's what that is. 240 demand. There we go. Okay. So something like this. And let's go down onto our 4 hour, give you a better idea of what's happening. We do have some bullish order flow that's obviously persisted. We're expecting to see some lower pricing, or I was hoping to see some lower pricing at least. And now we've sort of seen this, liquidation of these highs, failure to essentially stay above. We have a very, very poor break. So what does that mean for us? Well, ultimately, I would be looking to probably trade this into maybe deeper portions of this to potentially then take this up into new highs and create bullish order flow. Again, just with the development that we have, that's kind of the only option right this second. Ideally, I wouldn't really want to be looking for longs up in these regions, although they could produce nice reactions. I would want to see a higher time frame liquidation across into sort of like this demand zone, something along the lines of this. Now, let me just kind of map this guy out. Okay, and you can just see that we have a beautiful equal lows kind of resting across here that we could potentially sweep into, be able to give us some higher pricing if and when that does happen, of course. So right now I'm just going to kind of clean up my pricing a little bit. So we're actually reacting to the low, and if you look at the low, this has in fact taken liquidity, barely, but enough that it did. Let's go like this and go 240 sweep. Okay, so now we've swept down, pushed back up, came back down, pushed away. So order flow is now bullish on the 4 hour. So we're looking to potentially take some sells, and I would say that reasonably taking sells into here, possibly even deeper into these levels like this. Are going to be reasonable areas to sort of start targeting. Yes, we're going to be counter against the H4, but as long as the 15-minute trend sort of aligns for us, we could justify essentially getting in. So if you look right now, essentially what we're reacting to originally was this guy resting right above here. Okay, so we tapped into this little supply region, and if I'm not mistaken, this is an interaction between demand right here as well. So it's a good level to consider at least starting to look for potential sells. So if I look at the 15-minute supply, and if I was to just drag this across like this, right? One of the things that you'll notice is that we have a lot of built-up liquidity in the market sitting across these highs. So I was expecting to induce this high right here coming into today, and I was expecting this to kind of get held and potentially give a strong reaction off of here. But it turns out that we obviously induced these highs as well. So with that being said, right now you can just see how development, or how it sort of developed rather. It's, I wouldn't say poor, but it's not necessarily the greatest. So ideally what we're going to want to see is some form of a run on liquidity, whether that be up into this level right here, and then a push down to create a break. We could start looking for potential criteria here. And then furthermore, we'd like to see something with inducement to be able to take this into the higher time frame POI. So ideally, we're looking for a sweep followed by an aggressive move to look for a confirmation entry, or if you're looking to catch the potential next pivot, we could possibly look to induce maybe this POI, come up into something along the lines of this, and then possibly drop down. Again, it's very tough to tell right this second. We have not seen the 15-minute order flow shift. However, we have created bearish order flow for the time being. Order flow shift would only happen on a failure of demand, at least the way that we interpret things. So right now we have bearish order flow, but the true shift hasn't really happened as of yet. So ideally, we'd like to see a shift. And then possibly some form of a take on liquidity, and then we can possibly start looking at criteria. So as it stands right now, if I was to look at a POI, it would be something along the lines of this, potentially, and possibly even in the wick. But until we see some form of further development, it would be very, very difficult to rationalize getting into a position until we sort of see confirmations, ideally a sweep, and then possibly something like this. So that's EU, basically staying on the higher time frame, and then basically staying on the 15-minute and above. So what I would do for alerts here is I would want to see some sort of a sweep. So in order for me to look at a sweep, like this is our partially mitigated, we're going to need a level of liquidity to take. So the level of liquidity that I'm looking to sort of take from the market would be something along the lines of this. So we're going to be looking for a sweep, 15-minute liquidity. And what I can do is add alert on the trend line and just say sweep of LQ on the 15M. Cool, so that's basically all I can look for. Once that actually happens and we get that break, then we can start considering what the next step is, depending on the confirmations we get further up. So that's for EU, and then let's get into the weekly. Same thing on GU. Ultimately, we've got this, supply that got created. We've broken down, come back up. We've matched the high, looking to put in a new low in terms of expectational order flow. However, we have lots of liquidity to take, and then possibly see some form of a reaction before dropping down. So we just need to be mindful of that, and we can look at our lower time frames to basically gain some context on what the next move is in terms of higher time frame order flow. Okay, so we get the swing structure. Swing structure was here. I would say, here. Anyways, you get the point. Here, all the way down. So now we have a new swing high. So if you look at this, if you look at this right now, just how it's sort of developed, like we've seen this breakdown. We've essentially liquidated this low. We've immediately snapped back into the range. If you were to look at just kind of how this is sort of set up, you can see that we don't necessarily have any liquidity to take into a POI. Perfect example would be something similar to this right here. We needed a level to take into this level. before getting further development, level of liquidity to take into this, and then all the way down, same thing. So level of liquidity to take, we took it from the market, probably reacting to this buy to sell, boom, pushes us down. So now the market is going to want to pull back and put in a new lower high potentially, and the idea is that we're going to need something to take from the market, right? So looking at this, we would want to see some form of a sweep and a take on liquidity before seeing that higher time frame move down. So just be mindful of that. So let's just mark out this. This is likely going to be a level that we're going to want to take from. And let's go down to our 4 hour just to give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So it looks like we're now fueling up for a potential move. We've come into the demand range. We needed a level of liquidity to take. We've taken that from the market. We've now essentially failed to create a new low, which means that more than likely this will get ran up into deeper portions of the POI. Now let's get down onto our lower time frame to kind of give us an idea of what's going on. So I would say that right now, if this ends up taking out this level, we could then trade from this level at some point to be able to take this up higher. So the next move in the market would likely be something along the lines of potentially playing this into a pullback. It's very, very difficult to say. We're kind of ranging in PA, indecisive in what the market really wants to do. Let's look at some of the details on the 15. So for me, this was a half decent level to sort of get involved with based on the fact that there was liquidation. We tap in, get the sweep of the zone, push down, we get the 15-minute order flow shift. So now I would expect to see maybe something come up into potentially here to then drop down into maybe deeper portions of this POI. It's, again, just difficult to kind of rationalize what's happening next, as we've had some sweepy behavior on both sides of the market. So yeah, right now I would say that if we produce a new low breaking this level, I would say that if we liquidate this level right here, I would be interested in then taking this as a level of inducement into this very specific POI. But until this level breaks, I don't really have a trade idea to be able to solidify the sells. So we need the break. Ideally, we want to see a sweep into this level and then a aggressive move to kind of follow suit. So we can sort of mark up this region right here and just say that ultimately, supply is in fact controlling our market from here. The other thing we could look at is that ultimately we've now got equal highs. So we could very well sweep above this and come up into deeper portions of this, possibly come up into these regions, which we've had marked out for a couple of days, up in here. So yeah, it's going to depend on, so if we just left from this region exactly like this and went up, I would say that the next pullback would probably happen from this area, and then we could start to look at levels to be able to potentially take this higher. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to mark too much out right this second on this because we're in like a weird spot of the leg right now. So if we put in that new high, I could then mark this and then start to look for stuff in the discount of this leg. But if we see this as our 15-minute order flow shift, and then we sweep up into here to then come down, that would be my more ideal sort of play. So right now I will actually set my alert, and I'll set it for around this region right above this high to induce this level. Add alert, and we'll say M15 supply above inducement. Bear with me. Save. Okay, not really that interested in this. Would much prefer to trade from here. Yeah, so that's basically it for this. Now, let's go over to gold. So gold on the weekly, again, we have a break of structure that happens. This is the low that creates the high. Obviously looking for longs. This high up in price doesn't look like it's going to be that favorable. However, lower time frame might show other things. So if we just jump down into the daily, so daily swing, 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 fails to create. So the swing, once we break, is right here. and this fails to create a new high, but it doesn't mean that we cannot create a new high from here. Let's get down into the nitty gritty of these details. Okay, so now fails to create, right? Fails to create a new high. Immediately gets an order flow shift. That happens right here. We come back, we sweep liquidity. We could very easily see something along the lines of this POI get mitigated at some point, and then possibly drop down. So we need to just bear in mind what the price is doing on our small or our lower time frames to be able to potentially capitalize on this move. Right now we're sort of reacting to this level right here. The original level that was kind of getting respected would have been probably this on the lower time frame. We've come up, we've induced twice, broken down, come back up into our range, and it looks like the market wants to push down. However, we can't discredit coming down into this demand range that does change order flow. So I am looking at this, and we do have higher time frame sort of bullish order flow that's happening. So I would say that reasonably we could come up into potentially these POIs before then dropping down. Let's have a look at what the lower time frames are sort of suggesting here. So if you look, okay, so we've got demand that rests above here. Demand. Oops, that's 240 demand. Okay, we get that nice recovery. We've induced or swept these lows right here, which is part of the criteria. So we do get that sweep of liquidity on the 4 hour, which is good. Now what looks to be happening is we've essentially come down, okay, liquidated, order flow shifts, right, comes back, mitigates, right. If this fails to create, ideally we'd like to see this level hold and then show some form of bullish order flow, and then we can start to potentially look, right. So right now we have bullish order flow that's basically started, but because we don't have anything to induce into this POI, more often than not what ends up happening is this will get induced and then probably shoot some sort of a reaction. So we just need to be very, very mindful of that. On the flip side of things, you can see that we've essentially liquidated across this high, and now we are reacting to supply to potentially come down lower into this potential weak low that rests right here, as this failed to create anything. So let's have a look now at our lower time frame and see what it is that is essentially happening. So again, this beautiful buy to sell. So this has been mapped out for a couple days. We get the initial drive that comes just past here, and then ultimately we liquidate the entire region, push down, and it looks like we are trying to create the potential for a new low. Just having a hard time with spread hours right now. So very, very difficult to understand whether or not this is going to end up holding right this second. I would say that reasonably the only level that I would look to trade long from would be somewhere underneath this low, mapping out POIs here, understanding where liquidity sort of rests, and then just watching how, like, we do not need to catch the bottom. We need order flow to realign and essentially be able to take this pro order flow into all this liquidity at some point or another. But it doesn't mean that we can't take sells down into it, but we do need to essentially see some really, really tight criteria for it. As it stands right now, it'd be very difficult for me to pick out sort of like a POI. Ideally, what we would want to see is something along the lines of this, and then sweep back up in to then be able to create liquidity to take and also liquidity to target. So this is all pending stuff right now, unfortunately, as we don't have anything super, super clear yet. We've gotten the first piece of the pie, which is the liquidation. We're looking for that order flow to realign. We're going to look for liquidity to take and then liquidity to target, and then be able to target all of these lows once it actually develops. So first thing we need to see, very simple, we need the lows to go, and then we have levels to take into the extreme, which then we can maybe potentially start taking into weak areas and weak areas depending on how we react to this level. So that's it for today. A little bit longer than normal. I'm going to start to try to keep these a little bit longer and just give a little bit more detail from higher time frame perspective to understand where the high probability plays come from. And then it's up to you whether or not you can be patient enough to actually let these things solidify and show us the confirmations necessary to get involved.